let me begin by kind of telling you what we're going to do and why we're doing it. Of all the things in Judaism, probably we are known for two really important ones that separate us from all the other nations. And because of that, the other nations, when they have been in control of us, they have wanted us to not be able to observe these two things. The first is Shabbat, and the second is Kashrut. There's Brit Milah, and there's all the other celebration of holidays and everything, but probably the two most outstanding things that Jews are famous for is the celebration of Shabbat and Kashrut. And what is it when we were under Greek and Roman and every other, they wanted us to work on Shabbat. So it's so important, it's so essential to Judaism, and yet, and I'll say for myself too, before I studied this, I didn't realize how fascinating it is for the evolution of Shabbat from what it was from day one, or day 7 I guess I should say, from what it was from the original day 7 to how we celebrate Shabbat today. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through, first of all, the Tanakh, and we're going to see how the issue of Shabbat evolved through the Tanakh, through the Torah, because there are differences from the beginning of the Torah to the end of the Torah, or as some of us will say, there are differences from one author who wrote parts of the Torah and another author who wrote other parts of the Torah. And then all through the prophets and the writings, there are all sorts of things that layer upon layer gets added to our concept of how we deal with this unique idea. And I really recommend very strongly, if you really want to read something that is so beautifully written, so spiritual, and so moving, it's Abraham Joshua Heschel's book, The Sabbath. You can read it in several hours. It's a small little book. You can get it for $8 or $10 through Amazon. And it is such a powerful, powerful book. I want to tell you, I want to give, okay, so now we're going to go observe the Sabbath, et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, l'doratam, to observe the Sabbath, or to make the Sabbath for all generations. Brit olam, a covenant. And again, we have only a few covenants. We have the covenant of Brit Milah, we have the covenant of Shabbat, we have the covenant of Tefillin. Is Tefillin a Brit? I don't think so. But anyway, that makes it so incredibly important when you get to the concept of covenant. Beini uvein b'nei Israel, between me and the children of Israel, oti li'olam, he is a sign forever, because 6 days God made the heavens and the earth. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat, and on the 7th day he ceased from work. But now, for the first time, Vayi Nafash is attributed to God. And that's a very interesting concept. It's one thing to understand God ceasing from work. It's another thing that is very anthropomorphic. We're implying that God must have been wiped out from this 6 days of activity, because on the 7th day he needed to be refreshed or rejuvenated or renewed in some sense or another. And since we know that makes no sense whatsoever, it is interesting that this is the first time that the concept of some sort of rest or refreshment is attributed to God, rather than just the idea that he ceased from work. Rabbi.
So this is the perfect example to this. And anybody who translates is really giving commentary. So let me go back to the other layer, a little bit more on the spiritual level, and start doing the commentary or the translation based on what I told you earlier. This is Ot. If you have the Shabbat becomes a sign. Shabbat becomes almost an experience that you can feel that there's a presence. The presence of the divine is felt when you are in the Shabbat. Just like the other experience that we were talking about, that there's always a trace. Zecher, zachor, to remember, is because there's a trace. You walk into a room and you see traces of someone's presence there. When we walk into, with our bodies, with our minds, with everything else, into the Shabbat, we have the trace of the divine. We become part of the holy, part of the spiritual. And here again, it reiterates with a different word. There are signs. The Shabbat itself is a sign of the divine. And oti, it's a sign between you and me, says God. You get into this experience, you're going to know me. You're going to know what it's like to be part of me. Because what happens, and again, this word that Seth, you were talking about, or asking, is it truly recreation? Is it truly rest? Is that what we're talking about, God? On one level, you can say that. On the other level, on the more spiritual level, it's what it is. It's spirit. It's re-spiritualizing. Reconnecting with your essence. The essence of the universe is what Shabbat really gives us the opportunity to experience. So that as much as the Creator, He unreels of Himself, He emanates of Himself, and that which doesn't exist becomes into existence, and then He stops the process, stops the creative essence of the process, and then He refills with spirituality, because it starts out in pure spirit, and then becomes that which is tangible, which wasn't even tangible before, but now all of a sudden there's a sense of existence of stuff, right? Things, including us. And so the Shabbat is the time of going back to the essential, back to the essence, the spiritual. So if we look at what happens through here, when it says mechaleleha, the person who desecrates, who gives it away, who says, I don't want your gift. Keep your lousy Shabbat for yourself. I don't need it. What does that person do? Mot yumat. You don't have a genuine life, because the word nefesh is what gives life. It's what animates. So a person says, I don't want your nefesh. It's like committing suicide. God says, here's a wonderful little gift I give you. It's called life. And life, in order to really fully benefit from it, you have to do stuff, because I give you animation, but then you have to stop. You have to reflect. You have to reconnect with your essential elements so that you can keep moving forward. Otherwise, what happens? You can't live. You can't really be alive. What you can be is something that may function as if it's alive. Just like, unfortunately, what we see sometimes in the hospital, we see somebody who has all these machines hooked up. God forbid, a terrible, terrible thing. It looks like the person's alive, but they're not. So the person can function as if he or she is alive without the sense of rejuvenation, without the sense of getting back to the moment of creation, getting back to the moment of purity of soul, and allowing the soul to do its functioning the way it's meant to be, not just secondarily pushed aside into almost a non-existent form. This entire thing is not a question of punishment. It's a question of, this is how I made you, says God. Do what I created you as, and you will surely have a full life, and you will surely have an experience of the highest level. Don't do what I tell you, and guess what? You're not going to be fully alive. And the word karet, where is it? To be cut off. Not only do you get cut off from yourself, your essential self, but you get also cut off from the midst of the nation. I'm taking a nation, I'm taking a people, and trying to elevate them from being mere workers, drones, those who have no options of doing anything other than just the work of others, people who have no choices, people who don't even function as human living things, but they function as as drones, as machines. Elevate that group of slaves into a different state, a state of masterfulness, a state of the Creator, a state of holiness, a state of spirituality. So if you want to be part of that special, extraordinary group, then you have to have this essential element. You have to know when to say, no, I will not work incessantly. I will not be a slave unto the work. I will be a free human being that is free to go back to my essence. That's recreation. That's going back to the creation moment. So again, this word ot, a sign, there's a trace of the presence of the Almighty. The same as what we saw in the previous quote. You have also a sign. You have a zecher. You have a visible, if you will, a tangible and experiential, not just memory, but trace of the divine. I hope that I don't confuse you too much with my interpretation.
So is death then not being fully alive?
In this essence, from the way I see it, it's not just tamut, it's mot yumat. You go through the experience of death itself. So let me give a sort of a familiar example. All of us know that we can function very nicely when we walk around and do whatever we do, and we're very productive, but then we need to stop and we need to go to sleep. What happens if instead of getting 8 hours of sleep, you decide, we'll get 6 hours of sleep? You can still function, but you're probably not as alert as you had full, solid sleep. Then you find out that you can still be functioning and you can still be productive, so let's cut it down to 2 hours a night. What happens? You become less productive. You become less capable. And then what if you decide, you know what? I don't really need sleep. That's ridiculous. That's a waste of time. I'm going to be productive all the time. You can't survive. You're going to be killing yourself in a real way. So if the good doctor that creates you, the doctor that tells you about, gives you a manual on how to function the best that you could possibly function, says, sleep so that you can work and be productive. Stop what you're doing so that you can be masterful. Let your soul take the opportunity to fill yourself with full of life as opposed to killing yourself by never rest, by never rejuvenate, by never having the intentionality of coming back to the spiritual. This is the master. This is the one that creates us. He's telling us how to truly live. I don't see it as a command or I'm going to kill you. No. This is the way that we are. This is a statement of reality for what we are. And the consequence is simply in our hands. One, to be cut off from the very existence and life itself. Two, to be cut off from this nation that is going to be elevated to the status of having full experience of life. Two things are stated here. So, yes, we got it.
So I think that we will continue from here. There are some great things, and we still have not even touched upon one of the absolute essentials of the Shabbat that we have not even begun to mention yet, and won't even be mentioned in the entire Torah, and not until the prophets. So I'll let you just think about that and sing it.